The package arrived on my birthday. Brown paper, blue ribbon, my father's handwriting after 6 years of silence. Happy birthday, kiddo. Let's start over. Inside were homemade cookies, meticulously decorated, from a man who'd never baked a day in his life, a man who measured love in obedience, punishment in teaspoons. I should have thrown them away. Instead, I gave them to my sister and her son. When my phone rang the next morning, his voice was ice. You did what? By nightfall, they were in the hospital. By dawn, I understood the truth that had been hiding in plain sight all these years. Some gifts aren't meant to be shared. And family recipes can be deadly when mixed with decades of obsession. Delaney Frost stared at the single candle flickering atop the store-bought cupcake on her kitchen counter. 33 years old today, and here she was, celebrating alone in her cramped Chicago apartment. The walls seemed to press in, just like the memories she'd been trying to outrun since her mother's funeral 3 years ago. She closed her eyes, made a wish out of habit rather than hope, and blew out the candle. The smoke curled upward, disappearing into the dim light of her kitchen, much like her connections to what remained of her family. The sharp buzz of her doorbell cut through the silence, startling her. She wasn't expecting anyone. Friends knew better than to surprise her on her birthday, a day she preferred to pass unmarked. Package for Delaney Frost, the delivery man said, thrusting a medium-sized box into her hands before hurrying back to his truck. The return address made her heart stutter. Gareth Frost, her father. The man she hadn't spoken to in nearly 6 years. Delaney set the box on her counter like it might contain something volatile. In many ways, it did. Relationships with Gareth had always been explosive, unpredictable. She examined the plain brown packaging, the meticulous handwriting she still recognized despite the years of silence. What the hell do you want? She whispered to the box. After 20 minutes of staring at it, she finally worked up the courage to slice through the tape. Inside, another box, this one white with a simple blue ribbon. A small card was taped to the top. Happy birthday, kiddo. Let's start over. Dad. The handwriting was unmistakable. The same precise lettering that had marked her childhood report cards with notes like could do better or disappointing effort. Inside the white box, nestled in tissue paper, were cookies, not store-bought, but clearly homemade, golden brown with perfect edges, decorated with intricate blue icing designs. Delaney stared at them, confusion washing over her. In all her years growing up, she had never once seen her father bake anything. Discipline, structure, and rigid expectations, those were Gareth Frost's specialties, not cookies with hand-piped icing. She picked one up, studying it. The detail was impressive, tiny flowers and swirls that must have taken hours of patient work. This didn't align with the man she knew. The cold, calculated father who measured love and accomplishments and obedience. Delaney put the cookie back. She couldn't bring herself to eat them, but throwing them away felt wrong too. The gesture was so out of character it left her unsettled, wondering what game he might be playing. Her phone lit up with a text from her sister. Happy birthday. Delegate wish we could celebrate together. Milo drew you a picture. Attached was a child's drawing of what appeared to be 2 women and a small boy standing in front of a house with a massive sun overhead. It made Delaney smile despite herself. She looked at the cookies again, then at her phone. On impulse, she texted back, actually, I was thinking of driving out to see you guys this afternoon. That okay? V's response was immediate. Yes, Milo will be thrilled. An hour later, Delaney was driving her aging Honda toward the suburbs where her younger sister had settled with her son. The cookie box sat on the passenger seat like an uninvited guest. This small rental house looked warm and inviting compared to Delaney's sterile apartment. Chalk drawings covered the driveway, and wind chimes tinkled from the porch. The sisters had taken different paths after their mother's death, the embracing motherhood and creating the loving home they'd never had while Delaney retreated into work and solitude. Aunt Delaney. 7-year-old Milo threw himself at her legs the moment she stepped onto the porch. His dark hair flopped over bright eyes that examined her face with unsettling perception. You look sad. Is it because birthdays make you think of Grandma? Milo, boundaries. They appeared behind him, her smile tired but genuine. At 30, she already had faint lines around her eyes, the marks of single motherhood and too many sleepless nights. Happy birthday, sis. The sisters embraced a brief but meaningful connection. Delaney held up the white box. I brought something. Inside, V made coffee while Delaney explained about the unexpected gift. Dad sent you cookies? V's eyebrows rose in disbelief. Our father? The man who once grounded me for a month because I snuck a single Oreo before dinner? The very same, Delaney said, opening the box. V peered inside. They're beautiful. But since when does Dad bake? Exactly what I thought, Delaney said. It feels weird. Wrong somehow. Milo appeared at the table, eyes widening at the cookies. Can I have one, Mom? Please. V hesitated, looking at Delaney. They're your birthday present. Delaney pushed the box toward them. Take them. I'm not going to eat them anyway. Consider it my gift to you guys. Are you sure? V asked. Positive. They're just going to sit in my apartment and get stale otherwise. Milo didn't need further encouragement. He grabbed a cookie decorated with an intricate star pattern and bit into it enthusiastically. These are so good, he proclaimed, crumbs spilling. They taste like honey and cinnamon. After moments hesitation, tried one too. He's right. These are actually delicious. She took another bite, studying the cookie. I don't understand. Dad never showed any interest in baking, or in birthdays for that matter. People change, Delaney suggested, not believing it herself. Not him, V said quietly. Not without a reason. They spent the afternoon catching up. V talking about her job at the local library, Milo showing off his rock collection and newest drawings. By the time Delaney left, the sky had darkened, and Milo had eaten 3 more cookies, while V had nibbled on 2. The box was half empty when Delaney hugged them goodbye. Call me tomorrow? V asked at the door. Promise, Delaney said, squeezing her sister's hand. The next morning, Delaney was pouring her first cup of coffee when her phone rang. The screen displayed a number she hadn't seen in years, but still knew by heart. Her father. Her finger hovered over the decline button, but curiosity won. Hello, Delaney. His voice was just as she remembered it. Deep, controlled, with an underlying tension that always made her feel like she was being evaluated. Did you get my package? I did, she said carefully. That was unexpected. So, he paused. How are the cookies? There was something in his tone, an eagerness that felt wrong, predatory, almost. Delaney's instincts flared in warning. Actually, I gave them to V and Milo, she said, keeping her voice casual. I'm not much of a sweets person these days. The silence that followed was absolute. When Gareth finally spoke, his voice had transformed into something she barely recognized, raw and filled with fury. You did what? The rage in those 3 words made Delaney physically recoil from the phone. They're just cookies, Dad, she said, her own anger rising defensively. What's the big deal? Those weren't meant for them, he hissed. They were for you. Only you. The call ended abruptly. Delaney stood frozen, the phone still pressed to her ear, a cold dread seeping through her veins. She called V immediately. No answer. She tried again, straight to voicemail. 20 minutes later, Delaney was in her car, breaking speed limits all the way to her sister's house. Her knuckles were white on the steering wheel as terrible possibilities raced through her mind. When she arrived, the front door was unlocked, unusual for security-conscious V inside. The house was eerily quiet. V. Delaney called, her voice echoing in the stillness. Milo. A faint moan from the bathroom drew her attention. She found V on the floor, pale and shivering, a sheen of sweat on her forehead. Something's wrong, V whispered, her voice raspy. Milo. He started vomiting at dawn. Couldn't stop. Mrs. Bradley next door took him to the ER. What about you? We need to get you to the hospital too, Delaney said, helping her sister to her feet. It's the cookies, V managed to say before another wave of nausea doubled her over. Has to be. Nothing else makes sense. As Delaney helped her sister to the car, the weight of what she'd done, or rather, what she'd avoided by pure chance, crashed down on her. The cookies hadn't been a peace offering. They'd been meant to harm her, and instead, she'd given them to the 2 people she loved most in the world. The antiseptic smell of the hospital burned Delaney's nostrils as she paced the waiting room floor. Her sister was being examined in one room, her nephew in another. The guilt pressed down on her like a physical weight. She had done this to them, however unintentionally. When the doctor finally approached, his expression was grave. Are you family? He asked. Yes, I'm V's sister, Milo's aunt. Delaney said quickly. How are they? Your nephew is stable but dehydrated. Your sister's condition is more concerning. Her symptoms are more severe. What's wrong with them? Delaney asked, her voice cracking. All signs point to some form of poisoning, the doctor said, watching her carefully. Do you have any idea what they might have ingested? Delaney hesitated. The truth would mean explaining about her father, about the cookies, about her terrible mistake in giving them away. She wasn't ready to voice those accusations without being certain. I brought them cookies yesterday, she said finally. Store-bought. I don't know what was in them. The lie tasted bitter, but she needed time to process what was happening to understand why her father would do this. We're running toxicology screens now, the doctor said. In the meantime, is there anything else you can tell me that might help? Before Delaney could answer, 2 uniformed police officers appeared behind the doctor. Hospital protocol for suspected poisonings. Ma'am, we'd like to ask you a few questions, the taller officer said. Delaney followed them to a small consultation room. Their questions were direct, clinical. What had V and Milo eaten in the past 24 hours? Did they have any allergies? Was there anyone who might want to harm them? The cookies, Delaney finally admitted. They weren't store-bought. My father sent them to me for my birthday. I gave them to my sister and nephew. Your father, the officer repeated, making a note. And why would your father send poisoned cookies? I don't know that they were poisoned, Delaney said, though she no longer believed that. But he was extremely angry when I told him I'd given them away. Angry how? He yelled. Said they were only meant for me. The officers exchanged a glance that Delaney couldn't read. We'll need your father's contact information, the second officer said. After the police left, Delaney sat beside Milo's bed, watching his small chest rise and fall, and 4 dripped fluids into his arm. He looked so fragile, so innocent. I'm so sorry, she whispered, though he couldn't hear her. Her mind drifted back to her childhood, to memories she'd tried to suppress. Gareth Frost had never been a warm father, but she'd always told herself he wasn't cruel, just strict, traditional, demanding excellence. But now darker memories surfaced. The time Vi had spilled juice on his newspaper and been locked in her room for an entire weekend. The disciplined dinners, where their father would serve bland, sometimes cold food as punishment for perceived infractions while he ate a normal meal across from them. Her mother's strange, recurring illnesses that seemed to flare whenever she disagreed with him. Had she deliberately blinded herself to the truth? Had Gareth always been capable of this kind of calculated harm? A nurse interrupted her thoughts. Miss Frost, your sister is asking for you. Vi looked ghostly against the white hospital sheets, but her eyes were clear. Where's Milo? Were her first words. He's okay, Delaney assured her. Resting in the pediatric ward. They say he'll recover faster than you. He ate less, and his symptoms started earlier, so they got fluids into him sooner. Vi nodded weakly. It was the cookies, wasn't it? I think so, Delaney admitted. Dad called this morning. He was furious that I gave them to you instead of eating them myself. Vi closed her eyes. I always knew he was messed up, but this. I told the police, Delaney said, but I'm not sure they believe me. There's no evidence besides my word. They will, Vi said with sudden intensity, because this isn't the first time. What do you mean? He used to do this to Mom, Vi whispered. With food. With drinks. I saw him once putting something in her tea when she'd made him angry. I was maybe 10. I tried to tell her, but she didn't believe me or couldn't afford to believe me. The revelation hit Delaney like a physical blow. All those times their mother had been ill, better than for days. Had that been Gareth's doing? We need to file a formal police report, Delaney said. Make sure they take this seriously. At the police station later that day, Detective Kellen Byrne listened to Delaney's account with professional detachment. He was younger than she'd expected for a detective, maybe mid-30s, with observant gray eyes that missed nothing. Miss Frost, I understand your concern, he said when she'd finished. But without the cookies themselves for testing or any physical evidence linking your father to the poisoning, this is going to be difficult to pursue. My sister and nephew are in the hospital, Delaney said, frustration rising. The timeline fits. My father's reaction on the phone could be interpreted multiple ways, Byrne finished. Look, I'm not dismissing you. We'll interview your father, check his background, but you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that we won't find enough to charge him. Delaney left the station feeling defeated, but determined. If the police wouldn't act quickly enough, she would find evidence herself. She drove 5 hours north to Michigan's Upper Peninsula, where Gareth had moved after her mother's death. The remote location had always seemed like a strange choice for a man who'd spent most of his life in cities. Now it felt ominous, a deliberate retreat to isolation. Gareth's house stood at the end of a long gravel driveway, partially hidden by towering pines. The building itself was unremarkable, a 2-story farmhouse with peeling white paint and shutters that hung slightly askew. There were no other homes visible from the property. Delaney parked out of sight and approached cautiously. No car in the driveway, no lights visible through the windows. She tried the front door anyway, unsurprised to find it locked. The back door, however, yielded to her push. It swung open with a creak that seemed deafening in the stillness. Inside, the house was colder than the autumn air outside, and nothing like the orderly home her father had maintained during her childhood. Books were stacked in precarious towers on every surface. Papers covered the dining table, many covered with her father's precise handwriting. The walls held an eclectic mix of religious imagery, crosses, framed Bible verses, and stranger symbols Delaney didn't recognize. Medical textbooks filled one bookshelf, many with markers protruding from their pages. In the kitchen, she found rows of glass jars on open shelves. Each was meticulously labeled belladonna, digitalis, aconite, taxus, alongside more innocuous herbs like lavender and rosemary. Some jars held dried plants, others powders or liquids. More disturbing were the smaller jars labeled with family names: Margaret, Helen, Delaney, Genevieve. These contained what looked like personal items: a button, a ribbon, what might have been a lock of hair. The sight of her own name on one of those jars sent a chill through Delaney. She backed away, bumping into a small table. A framed photograph fell to the floor, the glass cracking. She picked it up, turning it over. It showed a young girl, maybe 12 or 13, with a serious expression and dark hair in neat braids. She wore a prim dress with a lace collar, out of place for what appeared to be the late 1970s, based on the photo quality. Written on the bottom in her father's handwriting, Corinne 1978. Delaney stared at the image, confusion clouding her thoughts. Who was Corinne? She had no relatives by that name that she knew of. The girl looked vaguely familiar, though Delaney couldn't place why. A noise outside startled her, the crunch of tires on gravel. Quickly, she slipped the photograph into her pocket and hurried toward the back door. Before leaving, an impulse drew her to a small desk in the corner. She pulled open the drawer and found a silver locket nestled in a velvet pouch. Her name was engraved on its surface. Inside the locket was a dried flower petal, nearly translucent with age, and what appeared to be a small lock of dark hair, too fine to be an adult's. A child's hair. The sound of a car door slamming galvanized her into action. She pocketed the locket and slipped out the back door, circling around to the woods behind the house. From the shelter of the trees, she watched as an elderly woman approached the house, key in hand. Not Gareth, but someone who had access to his home. Delaney retreated further into the woods, her mind racing with questions. As she drove back toward Chicago, her phone rang. An unfamiliar number. "Hello," she answered cautiously. "Delaney." The woman's voice was aged but strong. "This is your aunt, Margot." "Margot Teller." Delaney nearly swerved off the road. Her father's sister, a woman she hadn't spoken to in over a decade. "How did you get my number?" Delaney asked. "That's not important right now," Margot said, her voice tense. "Listen to me carefully. You need to stay away from your father. He's not done yet." "What do you mean?" "Do you know what he did?" "The cookies." "I know more than you can imagine," Margot interrupted. "And I've kept silent too long, but this isn't a conversation for the phone. Meet me tomorrow. The Lakeside Diner in Evanston, noon." The line went dead before Delaney could respond. V was awake when Delaney arrived at the hospital the next morning, still pale but sitting up, sipping water through straw. "You look like hell," V said by way of greeting. "I drove to Dad's house yesterday," Delaney admitted, pulling a chair close to the bed. V's eyes widened. "Are you insane? What if he'd been there?" "He wasn't, but I found some things." Delaney hesitated, unsure how much to share in her sister's fragile state. "Tell me," V insisted. "No more secrets in this family. Look where that's gotten us." Delaney described the strange house, the labeled jars, the photograph of the unknown girl named Corinne. She didn't mention the locket with her own name. Some instinct held her back from sharing that particular detail. "I always thought there was something wrong with him," V said quietly. "But Mom kept making excuses. Your father is under a lot of pressure. Your father shows love differently. Your father had a difficult childhood." She took another sip of water, wincing slightly. "But I saw things, delicate things I tried to tell you about, but you never wanted to hear it." "Like what?" Delaney asked, though part of her already knew. "He used to put things in Mom's food when she upset him. I caught him once, grinding something into her coffee. When I asked what he was doing, he said it was a special sweetener because Mom worked so hard." These eyes filled with tears, and then she'd get sick. Every time they argued, within days, she'd be bedridden with migraines or stomach flu. "Why didn't you tell someone? A teacher? A doctor?" "I tried telling Mom. She said I was imagining things, making up stories." V looked away. "I think she knew deep down, but admitting it would have meant facing the truth about who she'd married, the danger she'd put us in. It was easier to pretend." A noise from the doorway interrupted them. Milo stood there in his hospital gown, a nurse hovering protectively behind him. "He wanted to see his mom," the nurse explained. "Just for a few minutes." Milo climbed carefully onto V's bed, his small face solemn. "Are you better now, Mom?" "Getting there, buddy," V assured him, smoothing his hair. "I had bad dreams," Milo said, his voice small. "Grandpa was in them. He said I shouldn't have eaten what wasn't mine." Delaney and V exchanged alarmed glances. "Milo, honey," V said carefully. "Grandpa hasn't seen you since you were a baby. You don't remember what he looks like?" "He was tall," Milo insisted, "with white hair and glasses, and he smelled like those sticks you burn sometimes." "Incense?" V asked, her voice strained. Milo nodded. "He said the cookies were special. Only for Aunt Delaney." After Milo had been taken back to his room, Delaney checked her phone. 3 missed calls and a voicemail from an unknown number. She stepped into the hallway to listen. "Delaney." Her father's voice, unnervingly calm. "I thought you were stronger. Just like your mother. Soft, sentimental, Stupid. You'll regret this interference. The message sent ice through her veins. It wasn't just anger in his voice. It was calculated menace. Later that morning, Detective Byrne arrived at the hospital, his manner notably less dismissive than the day before. "We've received the preliminary toxicology reports," he said without preamble. "Both your sister and nephew had traces of aconite in their systems. Monkshood, also called wolfsbane. It's highly toxic, even in small doses." "Then you believe me now?" Delaney asked. "About my father? I'm taking your concerns seriously," Burns said carefully. "We're trying to locate Gareth Frost for questioning, but he seems to have vacated his residence. Do you have any idea where he might go?" Delaney shook her head, then remembered. "I'm meeting my aunt today, his sister, Margot Heller. She called me yesterday, sounded worried. She might know something." Byrne nodded. "I'd like to speak with her as well. Mind if I join you?" The lakeside diner was nearly empty when they arrived. Margot Heller sat in a corner booth, her back to the wall, eyes on the door. She was in her 70s with the same sharp features as Gareth, though softened by age. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and she wore a simple navy dress with a white cardigan. When she spotted Delaney, her expression changed, relief mixed with apprehension. The appearance of Detective Byrne beside Delaney seemed to throw her momentarily. "You brought the police," she said, her voice carrying the same crisp enunciation as Gareth's. "This is Detective Byrne," Delaney said, sliding into the booth. "He's investigating the poisoning of my sister and nephew." Margot's thin lips pressed together. "So he's doing it again," she murmured, more to herself than to them. "Mrs. Heller," Byrne said, sitting beside Delaney, "anything you know about Gareth Frost that might help us locate him or understand his motivations would be extremely valuable." Margot studied them both, then reached into her handbag and withdrew a faded photograph. "I think it's time you learned about Corinne," she said, placing the photo on the table. The image showed two children, perhaps 10 years old, a boy and a girl, unmistakably twins. The boy was clearly a young Gareth. The girl, with the same serious eyes and determined jaw, must be Corinne. "My father had a twin?" Delaney asked, stunned. "Has," Margot corrected, "though Gareth would have you believe otherwise. Corinne didn't die, not physically anyway. She's been institutionalized for nearly 50 years. "Institutionalized?" Byrne repeated. "For what reason? Officially?" "Severe paranoid schizophrenia with delusions." Margot's voice was bitter. "In reality, it was the result of years of our father's treatments. Edward Frost was obsessed with the idea of purifying the bloodline, strengthening the family constitution. He experimented on his own children, especially Corinne." "Experimented how?" Delaney asked, though she feared she already knew the answer. "Herbs, tinctures, homemade remedies, administered through food, mainly sweets, which were otherwise forbidden in our house. Gareth was spared the worst of it. He was the son, the heir." Margot's hands trembled slightly as she continued. "I was already away at nursing school when the worst happened. Corinne had a psychotic break at 16. She attacked our father with a kitchen knife, screaming that he was poisoning her." "Was he?" Byrne asked. "Without question," Margot said firmly. But no one believed her. Edward was respected in the community, a pharmacist, a church elder. Corinne was committed, diagnosed, medicated into oblivion. "And Gareth?" Delaney prompted. "Gareth was his father's son in every way," Margot said grimly. "He learned everything. The herbs, the formulations, the ideology. But most importantly, he learned how to appear normal to the outside world while harboring monstrous beliefs." She pushed another item across the table, a small, leather-bound journal. "This was Kareem's. I took it from a house after she was committed. I thought someday it might help prove what was done to her." Delaney opened the journal carefully. The early pages contained childish drawings and observations about nature. As the entries progressed, the handwriting became more erratic, the content increasingly disturbing. Paranoid thoughts, accusations, desperate pleas for help. One entry stood out, circled multiple times in shaky red ink. "Daddy says I'm not allowed sweets anymore unless I behave. He says love tastes bitter." "Where is Karen now?" Delaney asked. "Stillwater Psychiatric Facility in northern Wisconsin." Margot replied, "I visit when I can, but she rarely recognizes me anymore. The medications have hollowed her out." "And my father knows you're telling me this?" Delaney asked. "Gareth believes I've kept his secrets all these years out of family loyalty," Margot said. "He doesn't know I've been gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment. When I heard about the cookies, I knew I couldn't stay silent any longer." "Mrs. Heller," Byrne interjected, "are you aware of any other incidents involving your brother and suspicious illnesses?" Margot's gaze dropped to the table. There were two women in the 1980s. Both dated Gareth briefly. Both disappeared under unusual circumstances. The police investigated, but found nothing conclusive. I've always believed Gareth was responsible. What were their names? Byrne asked, notebook ready. Lisa Winters and Diane Taylor, Margot said. Lisa was a nurse at the hospital where Gareth worked as an orderly. Diane was a graduate student researching folk medicine. Both showed interest in Gareth's knowledge of herbal remedies. As they left the diner, Byrne thanked Margot for her information and asked her to remain available for further questions. When he stepped away to make a phone call, Margot gripped Delaney's arm. There's something else, she whispered urgently, something I couldn't say in front of him. Your mother didn't die of natural causes. Before Delaney could respond, Byrne returned, and Margot quickly released her arm. That night, alone in her apartment, Delaney began receiving text messages from an unknown number, biblical verses about betrayal and sacrifice. She blocked the number only to receive identical messages from a different one minutes later. In the morning, she found a dead cardinal on her windowsill, its beak sealed shut with what appeared to be candle wax. A clear message, silence or suffer. As she carefully disposed of the bird, her phone rang. It was Byrne. We found something you need to see, he said without greeting. Can you come to the station right away? The evidence lay spread across a conference table, old newspaper clippings, police reports, and photographs. 2 missing person cases from 1983 and 1985, Lisa Winters and Diane Taylor, just as Margot had said. Both cases went cold, Byrne explained. No bodies, no crime scenes, no clear evidence of foul play. But there's this. He pointed to a detail in one report. Lisa Winters had complained of recurring illness in the weeks before her disappearance. Her roommate told police she would become violently ill after dates with her new boyfriend, a hospital orderly named Gary Fletcher. Gary Fletcher? Delaney questioned. We believe it was an alias used by Gareth Frost, Byrne said. The physical description matches, and we found employment records for a Gary Fletcher at the same hospital where your father worked under his real name around the same time. The fingerprints on file for Fletcher are a partial match to Gareth Frost's. He poisoned them, Delaney said, the realization settling like lead in her stomach. Just like he tried to poison me. We don't know that for certain, Byrne cautioned, but we have enough to bring him in for questioning. The problem is finding him. I might know where to look, Delaney said slowly. Margot mentioned Corinne is at Stillwater Psychiatric Facility. If he knows his sister has been talking to us, he might go there to silence her. Byrne finished. I'll call the Wisconsin authorities immediately. As they waited for word from Wisconsin, Delaney felt a strange calm descend. The scattered pieces of her life, her father's coldness, her mother's mysterious illnesses and death, her own instinctive distrust of food, were finally forming a coherent, if horrifying, picture. She was the daughter of a poisoner, a man who used food, the most basic form of nurture and love, as a weapon. What did that make her? The morning after their discovery about the missing women, Delaney drove V and Milo from the hospital to her apartment. Both were still weak but stable enough for discharge, and the doctors had agreed they shouldn't return to V's house alone, not with Gareth still at large. We'll stay just until we figure things out, V said, settling Milo on Delaney's couch with his favorite stuffed dinosaur and a borrowed tablet. Delaney nodded, though she knew figuring things out wouldn't be simple. Their family's foundation had crumbled beneath them, revealing dark chambers they were only beginning to explore. I called Mrs. Bradley next door to get some of our things, B continued, her voice low. She said a man was at our house yesterday, just standing there, staring at the windows. Delaney felt a chill. Did she describe him? Tall, white-haired, well-dressed, like he was going to church. V's eyes met Delaney's. It was him. Delaware. He's watching us. Before Delaney could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from Detective Byrne. Wisconsin authorities checked Stillwater. No sign of Gareth, but Corinne agitated, saying brother was here. Call me. As Delaney dialed Byrne's number, a sharp pain flashed behind her eyes, blurring her vision. She steadied herself against the kitchen counter, waiting for it to pass. You okay? V asked, watching her with concern. Just tired. Delaney lied, though this was the third such episode since morning. Alongside the blurred vision came waves of nausea, a metallic taste lingering in her mouth. When Byrne answered, his voice was tense. Gareth was at Stillwater yesterday, but left before authorities arrived. The staff didn't think anything of his visit. He's listed as Kareem's next of kin, makes regular donations to the facility. What did he want with her? Delaney asked. Hard to say. Kareem's not exactly lucid, but she keeps saying he took it back. Any idea what that means? Delaney thought of a locket with her name, the dried flower inside. Maybe. I need to check something. After ending the call, Delaney searched her coat pocket for the locket she'd taken from Gareth's house. It wasn't there. What's wrong? V asked, seeing her growing panic. There was a locket at Dad's house with my name on it. I took it, but now it's gone. Delaney dumped the contents of her purse onto the counter. Nothing. Could you have dropped it? Or he took it back, Delaney murmured, remembering Kareem's words. If he was at my apartment, the realization hit her with frightening clarity. If Gareth had been in her apartment, he could have left something behind. Something like cookie crumbs in her coat pocket, easy to mistake for residue from the original box. V, I think you got to me too, Delaney said, the room starting to spin. I'm showing the same symptoms you had. V's face paled. We need to get you to the hospital now. The emergency room doctor confirmed what Delaney had suspected, traces of aconite in her bloodstream, though at lower levels than V and Milo had experienced. Fortunately, you caught it early, the doctor explained. We're flushing your system with activated charcoal and 4 fluids. You should recover fully, but we'd like to keep you overnight for observation. From her hospital bed, Delaney called Byrne to update him. He's escalating, she concluded. First the cookies meant for me, then contaminating my apartment when that failed. We've got officers watching your place in the hospital, Byrne assured her. And we're tracking his credit cards, phone, everything. He can't stay hidden for long. There's something else, Delaney said. My Aunt Margot told me something about my mother before you came back at the diner. She implied my mother didn't die of natural causes. What was the official cause of death? Heart failure. She had a history of health problems, at least that's what we were told. Delaney's voice caught. But now I'll look into it, Byrne promised. In the meantime, focus on getting better. And, Delaney, be careful what you eat or drink, even in the hospital. The warning wasn't necessary. Delaney had already decided to refuse all food and accept only sealed water bottles that she opened herself. That evening, Margot visited, her expression grave as she settled into the chair beside Delaney's bed. The doctors say you'll recover, she said, more statement than question. Looks that way, Delaney agreed. Margot, you said something about my mother, that she didn't die naturally. Margot's gaze dropped to her hands, weathered and spotted with age. Helen tried to leave Gareth when you were about 12. She'd seen enough to know what he was capable of, but he had insurance. What kind of insurance? Evidence, fabricated, of course, that she had harmed Corinne years earlier during a visit to the institution. He threatened to go to the police, have her arrested, take you girls away. Margot twisted the plain gold band she still wore, though Delaney knew her husband had died decades ago. Helen stayed, but she never stopped planning her escape. When you girls were grown, she finally told him she was leaving for good, and then she got sick, Delaney said softly. The official diagnosis was viral myocarditis leading to heart failure, Margot confirmed. But I was a nurse for 40 years. I know poisoning when I see it, especially the kind that mimics natural illness. Why didn't you say anything? Report him. I had suspicions, not proof. By the time Helen died, Gareth had already laid the groundwork. Everyone knew she had a weak heart. And he was careful, always careful. Margot looked up, her eyes shining with unshed tears. I've been a coward, Delaney. I should have spoken up years ago, saved you girls from all this. You're speaking now, Delaney said, reaching for her aunt's hand. That's what matters. The next day, released from the hospital, Delaney joined Byrne on a drive to Pine Hollow Cemetery, where Corinne Frost was supposedly buried. According to county records, Corinne Frost died in 1984 and was interred here, Byrne explained as they walked among the weather headstones. But we know she's alive at Stillwater. So, who's in the grave? Delaney asked. That's what we're going to find out. The court approved an exhumation order this morning. Byrne pointed to where cemetery workers were preparing equipment near a simple gray marker bearing the name Corinne Elizabeth Frost. Look at this, Delaney said, kneeling beside the stone. Fresh wildflowers lay at its base, not yet wilted. Someone's been here recently. As they waited for the exhumation to begin, Byrne received a call that made him step away. When he returned, his expression had changed. We found something at your father's house, he said. A hidden room behind a false wall in the basement. Inside were old videotapes, dozens of them, dating back to the 1970s. What's on them? Delaney asked, though part of her didn't want to know. Family footage, mostly. Your father apparently documented everything. The tech team is going through them now, but they've already found something you should see. Back at the police station, Byrne led Delaney to a small viewing room where a technician had queued up one of the tapes. The grainy footage showed a living room Delaney didn't recognize, probably from her father's earlier home. A young girl, perhaps 10 years old, sat rigidly on a flowered couch while a man's voice spoke off camera. This is Corinne's 10th birthday, Gareth's younger voice narrated. A special day for a special girl. The camera zoomed in on Corinne's face. She wasn't smiling. Her eyes darted nervously towards someone out of frame. Dad made you a special treat, Gareth continued. Show the camera what a good girl you are. A hand appeared, holding a cupcake topped with a single candle. Corinne shrank back. I don't want it, she whispered. Don't be ungrateful. The voice hardened. Take it. Corinne reluctantly accepted the cupcake, her hands trembling. Now blow out the candle and take a bite. Show Dad how much you appreciate his gift. Tears slid down Corinne's cheeks as she blew out the candle. She hesitated, then took a tiny bite of the cupcake. Good girl, Gareth said, his voice softening. This is how you make memories. This is how you learn. Corinne's face contorted in disgust, but she forced herself to swallow. Another bite, Gareth instructed. Finish it all. The footage continued, unbearable in its mundane cruelty, as Corinne was made to eat the entire cupcake while Gareth narrated her lessons in obedience and gratitude. Delaney looked away, her stomach churning. Turn it off, please. As the screen went black, Burns said quietly, there are dozens more like this. The team is still cataloging them, but they span years. Some feature your mother. Did you find anything about Lisa Winters or Diane Taylor? Not yet, but we're still looking. This is enough to bring him in on charges of child abuse at minimum. If you can find him, Delaney said. We will, Byrne promised. Every officer in 3 states is looking for him, but Gareth found them first. When Delaney returned to her apartment that evening, a package waited outside her door, a sealed tin labeled forgiveness in her father's distinctive handwriting. With gloved hands, Byrne carefully opened it in Delaney's kitchen. Inside were more cookies, nearly identical to the first batch, and a letter. Delaney, you've always been the stronger one. Like me, like Corinne before the weakness took her. Your mother tried to poison that strength, make you soft like she made your sister. Now the time has come for purity. One daughter must pay to cleanse the bloodline. Only one may carry the truth. The other must taste it. I've waited long enough, Dad. He's targeting V, Delaney said, her voice tight with fear. Where is she now? Byrne asked sharply. At her friend Amber's house with Milo. I thought they'd be safer away from my apartment with an officer watching from outside. Byrne was already dialing. Officer Reyes, check in on the sister and boy at the Taylor residence. He listened, his expression darkening. When did anyone see which direction? Hanging up, he turned to Delaney. A nurse picked up your sister from her friend's house an hour ago, said there was a complication with her blood work needed to bring her back to the hospital. The friend thought it was strange but didn't question it. Milo, still at the friend's house. The nurse said it was just routine, nothing to worry the boy about. A cold certainty settled in Delaney's chest. It was him, dressed as a nurse. The officer is checking hospital security footage now, but I'm betting that's exactly what we'll see. Byrne was already moving toward the door. We need to find them, fast. As darkness fell, Delaney paced her apartment while Byrne coordinated the search for V. Every hospital, clinic, and medical facility within 50 miles was being checked. Traffic cameras were being reviewed for Garrett's car. There has to be something in his letter, Delaney insisted, reading it again. He's theatrical, like symbolism. One must pay to cleanse the bloodline. What does that mean? Her phone rang. Margot. Did you find her? Delaney asked without preamble. No, but I might know where to look, Margot said, her voice tight with urgency. Gareth always had a fixation with sacred spaces. When we were children, our father would conduct his cleansing rituals in the church kitchen after hours. He was the custodian, had keys. A church kitchen? Delaney repeated, gesturing to Byrne. Are there any churches Gareth is connected to? St. Michael's maybe, Margot said. It's about 30 miles northwest of the city, very isolated. He donated money for their renovation last year, mentioned it in his Christmas card. Byrne was already typing on his phone. St. Michael's Lutheran, off Route 14. Looks like it's surrounded by woods, nearest neighbor over a mile away. We're going there now, Delaney told Margot. Call if you think of anything else. The drive to St. Michael's felt endless, though Byrne pushed well beyond the speed limit. Lights flashing. They rode mostly in silence, each lost in thoughts too dark to voice. St. Michael's was a small white clobbered building with a modest steeple, the kind of rural church that had served its community for generations. A gravel parking lot held a single car, Gareth's sedan. Wait for backup, Byrne instructed as he drew his weapon. They're 10 minutes out. We might not have 10 minutes, Delaney said, already moving toward the church's side door. Inside, the building was eerily silent, lit only by a few security lights. They moved quietly through the sanctuary, past wooden pews and a simple altar, toward a swinging door marked kitchen. The smell hit them first, sugar and cinnamon, the warm scent of baking that should have been comforting, but now turned Delaney's stomach. Through the small window in the door, she could see Gareth's back as he bent over something on the counter. Beside him, slumped in a chair, was V. She's alive, Delaney whispered, seeing her sister's chest rise and fall. But she's not conscious. Byrne signaled for Delaney to stay back as he eased the door open, gun raised. Police. Don't move, Gareth. Gareth turned slowly, a serene smile on his face. He looked smaller than Delaney remembered, though his eyes burned with the same intensity that had frightened her as a child. Detective, he acknowledged calmly, as if welcoming a guest. And, Delaney, right on time. Step away from your daughter, Byrne ordered. My daughter, Gareth repeated, placing peculiar emphasis on the word. Yes, she is that, though not my true heir. That would be Delaney. He gestured to V, who stirred slightly but didn't wake. She's merely sedated. For now, I wanted her to witness the reconciliation. There's no reconciliation happening here, Delaney said, stepping forward despite Byrne's warning glance. It's over, Dad. We know about Corinne, about Lisa and Diane, about what you did to Mom, what I did to your mother. Gareth's face hardened. She wouldn't take what I made. You think love is free? It's earned through obedience, through trust. He picked up a cookie from the tray beside him, identical to those he'd sent Delaney. These are how we show devotion in this family. How we prove our worth. By poisoning the people who trust you? Delaney asked. By testing them, Gareth corrected. Your mother failed. Corinne failed. But you, Delaney, you have her strength, her potential. Corinne isn't dead, Delaney said carefully, watching his reaction. We know she's at Stillwater. Gareth smiled, a secretive, knowing expression that chilled her blood. Corinne is alive in the only way that matters, through you. You are her worthy twin reborn. With horrifying clarity, Delaney understood. In his twisted mind, she wasn't just his daughter. She was somehow Kareem's replacement, a second chance at whatever sick experiment he'd been conducting for decades. Put the cookie down, Gareth, Byrne said, his gun still trained on the older man. You don't understand what's happening here, Detective, Gareth said dismissively. This is family business. Sacred work. In a swift movement, he lunged toward Delaney, grabbing her arm with surprising strength, shoving a cookie toward her mouth. Take it. Prove you're worthy. Delaney reacted instinctively, grabbing a heavy cast-iron skillet from the counter and swinging it with all her strength. It connected with Gareth's shoulder, sending him stumbling backward. The impact knocked loose a flood of memories, childhood games where they were punished with salt cookies if they lost, her mother lying pale in bed after disagreeing with Gareth about Delaney's college choices, the strange bitter aftertaste in her birthday cake the year she turned 16, and announced she wanted to study art instead of medicine. You've been doing this our whole lives, she said, the realization washing over her in a wave of nausea. The cookies, the cakes, they were never treats. They were control. Gareth had recovered his balance, his face twisted with rage. You ungrateful child, after everything I've done to purify our line. To strengthen you. To poison us, Delaney corrected, moving toward V, to punish us for being human instead of whatever twisted ideal you created. While they spoke, Byrne had circled behind Gareth, but the older man sensed his approach. With surprising agility, he grabbed a knife from the counter and pointed it at V's throat. Stay back, he warned, or she pays the price for her sister's defiance. The standoff held for a breathless moment. Then, with a groan, V began to stir, disrupting Gareth's focus just long enough for Byrne to tackle him to the ground. As they struggled, Delaney dragged her semi-conscious sister away from the fight. Behind them, a pot of oil Gareth had been heating tipped over, igniting on the gas flame. Fire spread rapidly across the counter. We need to get out, Delaney shouted to Byrne, who had Gareth subdued but handcuffed. They stumbled from the burning kitchen, half carrying V between them, Gareth shuffling ahead under Byrne's guard. Outside, the night air was sweet relief after the smoke and heat. But as they reached the parking lot, Gareth twisted suddenly from Byrne's grip and bolted toward the woods behind the church. Stay with her, Byrne yelled to Delaney, taking off after Gareth. Delaney lowered V gently to the ground, cradling her sister's head in her lap as distant sirens announced the approach of backup. Del? V murmured, her eyes fluttering open. What happened? It's okay, Delaney soothed. You're safe now. A crash echoed from the woods, followed by Byrne's shout. Conflicted, Delaney looked from her sister to the dark tree line. Go, Vi whispered, pushing herself upright. I'm okay. Help him. Delaney raced toward the woods, following the sounds of struggle. She found them in a small clearing, Byrne on his knees, nursing what looked like a head wound, while Gareth knelt several yards away, clawing frantically at the ground. He's all yours, Byrne said, wincing as he stood. He fell down the ravine, hit his head. I don't think he knows where he is anymore. Indeed, Gareth seemed oblivious to their presence. He dug at the soil with bare hands, muttering to himself, occasionally calling out Kareem's name. Blood trickled from a gash on his forehead, but he paid it no mind. What's he doing? Delaney asked. I think he buried something here, Byrne said. Or believes he did. As they watched, Gareth's digging grew more desperate. Corinne, he shouted. I'm coming for you. I'll bring you home. The distant sirens grew louder. Flashlight beams cut through the trees as officers and paramedics approached. Gareth Frost, Byrne announced formally. You're under arrest for the attempted murder of Genevieve Frost and Milo Frost, the assault of Delaney Frost, and kidnapping. You have the right to remain silent." As Byrne recited the Miranda warning, Gareth continued digging, lost in whatever nightmare lived in his mind until officers gently but firmly pulled him away from the disturbed earth. "We'll have forensics examine this area tomorrow," Byrne told Delaney as paramedics led Gareth away. "There may be evidence here relating to the missing women." Delaney nodded, exhaustion suddenly overwhelming her. The adrenaline that had carried her this far was ebbing, leaving only a bone-deep weariness and the dawning realization that the nightmare was finally ending. But not everyone gets a happy ending. 3 days later, before forensics could fully process the site behind the church, Gareth Frost was found dead in his cell. He had somehow obtained cleaning chemicals and ingested them, a final poisoning, self-administered. In his cell, authorities found a hand-drawn recipe book, its pages filled with names and dates going back 4 decades. Lisa Winters and Diane Taylor were there, alongside Delaney's mother Helen and dozens of others Delaney had never heard of. Each name was followed by cryptic notations, ingredients, dosages, effects. More disturbing was the discovery at the excavation site behind St. Michael's Church. The remains found there weren't recent. Forensic analysis dated them to the early 1980s, but DNA testing would later confirm they weren't Corinne's, as the headstone in Pine Hollow Cemetery claimed. They belonged to a young woman named Elaine Morton, a nursing student who had disappeared in 1982, last seen with a hospital orderly named Gary Fletcher. As for Corinne's grave, the exhumation revealed another victim, partial remains that would eventually be identified as Diane Taylor's. Corinne herself remained at Stillwater, trapped in a pharmaceutical haze that decades of inappropriate medications had rendered nearly permanent. When Delaney visited, her aunt showed no recognition, no awareness of her brother's death or the truth that had finally emerged. 6 months passed. Spring arrived, bringing new growth to cover the scars of winter. In a modest house on the outskirts of Chicago, Delaney watched as Milo carefully planted sunflower seeds along the garden fence. "Gently," she instructed. "They're fragile at first, but they'll grow strong." Nearby, the arranged patio furniture on their new deck, a housewarming gift from Detective Byrne, who had remained in their lives long after the case was officially closed. The decision to move in together had come naturally after everything they'd endured. Healing was easier together, the nightmares less terrifying when someone who understood was just across the hall. "Do you think they'll be taller than me?" Milo asked, patting soil over the last seed. "By the end of summer, definitely," Delaney assured him. At 8 now, Milo had grown an inch since his birthday, but the sunflowers would easily outpace him. Later, after Milo had gone to bed, Delaney and V sat on the deck with mugs of herbal tea, a routine that had taken months for Delaney to feel comfortable with. Food and drink had become complicated in the aftermath. Trust a fragile commodity that required constant nurturing. "Milo said something in therapy today," V said, breaking their companionable silence. "He told Dr. Warner, 'I know you saved me, Auntie.'" Delaney felt her throat tighten. "He shouldn't think of it that way. If I hadn't given you those cookies in the first place, then you would have eaten them," V interrupted firmly, "and we might have lost you." "Milo's right. You did save us by finding Dad, by stopping him. We saved each other," Delaney said after a moment. "That's what family is supposed to do." The next day, Delaney visited Margot at her assisted living facility. At 76, her aunt had aged visibly in the months since Garrett's death, as if holding her secrets had somehow preserved her and unburdening them had accelerated time's passage. "I went through the last of Garrett's papers," Margot said, pushing a faded leather journal across the table. "This was hidden in a safe deposit box. I think you should have it." The journal was Corinne's, a later volume than the one Margot had shared earlier. The entries, though still erratic, showed a maturity the earlier writings lacked. "She wrote this at Stillwater?" Delaney asked, carefully turning the brittle pages. Margot nodded. During a period when her medications were adjusted, she had more clarity then. Delaney stopped at an entry dated June 14, 1983. The handwriting was steadier than in previous entries, the thoughts more coherent. "I dreamed of Delaney again last night. My little niece, though I've never met her. Gareth showed me a photo. She has our eyes, the frost eyes as Father called them. I worry for her. I need to find a way to warn Helen before history repeats. Father always said, 'Twins share a soul.' If that's true, perhaps part of mine can watch over her, keep her from my fate. I hope someone remembers me without fear, without the taint of madness Father and Gareth painted over everything I was." Delaney looked up, questions burning. "She knew about me? Tried to warn my mother?" "Corinne had moments of absolute clarity," Margot explained. "During one of them, she convinced a sympathetic nurse to mail a letter to your mother. That's what finally gave Helen the courage to plan her escape. And that's why he killed her," Delaney said softly. Because she knew the truth and was going to take us away. Your mother died protecting you girls, Margot confirmed, just as Corinne tried to protect you in her way. The revelation settled over Delaney like a mantle, not a burden, but a connection to the women who had come before her, who had recognized evil and stood against it even at terrible cost. Weeks later, Delaney sat at her computer, finalizing an anonymous op-ed she'd been working on for months. It detailed the patterns of generational abuse in her family without naming names, a warning, a testimony, a reclamation of truth. The closing paragraph read, "Love is not supposed to taste bitter. It shouldn't leave you questioning your perceptions or your worth. Real nurturing doesn't come with conditions or tests. It is freely given, never forced down unwilling throats. I know this now, though the lesson came at terrible cost." She hit send, then closed her laptop. On her calendar, a reminder flashed, her first session with a baking therapy group for trauma survivors. The irony wasn't lost on her, but there was healing in reclaiming what had been weaponized against them. Summer turned to fall. They opened a community garden and food pantry in a vacant lot near their home. The sign, painted by Milo, read simply, "Corinne's Garden," a memorial to an aunt he'd never met but whose story had become part of their family's truth. Detective Byrne, now retired, brought them the evidence box from Gareth's case before moving to Michigan. "Department's closing the file," he explained. "Thought you should have this. Foreclosure." Inside, among the photographs and reports, was a small evidence bag containing a half-burned cookie recovered from the church kitchen. The lab had found a partial fingerprint on it preserved in the hardened icing, a print that matched samples from Lisa Winter's apartment forgotten in an evidence locker for nearly 40 years. "Does it feel finished to you?" Byrne asked as they sorted through the box. "I don't think it ever will." "Not completely," Delaney admitted, "but we're making peace with it day by day." After Byrne left, Delaney walked to the corner bakery, a simple errand that still required conscious effort, a deliberate choice to trust. Outside the shop, a young girl offered samples on a tray. "Cookie?" she asked brightly. "They're chocolate chip." Delaney looked at the innocent offering, remembering all the times food had been used as control, as punishment, as poison. "No, thank you," she said gently, with a small smile that held no fear, only the quiet strength of someone who had walked through darkness and emerged intact. As she continued home, Delaney thought about the journals, the videos, the recipe book, all the documentation of Gareth's madness. There was a through line in all of it, a lesson she was still learning to articulate. "I used to think the worst thing you could do was give away something meant for you," she thought, watching autumn leaves dance along the sidewalk. "But now I know. The worst thing is trusting what was never loved to begin with." Her phone buzzed with a text from V. Milo made dinner. "Nothing fancy, just pasta." "Ewan? On my way," Delaney replied, quickening her pace toward home. The real kind, built on trust and healing and the simple truth that family is what you make it, not what you inherit. And sometimes, love tastes exactly as sweet as it should. What would you do if you discovered your family's darkest secret was baked into every childhood memory? Like and subscribe for more psychological thrillers that explore the terrifying recipes some families pass down through generations.